When the Gnostic teachers of the 2nd century CE began formulating their cosmologies of fallen divine sparks and malevolent creator gods, they were drawing on a philosophical well that had been flowing for over 500 years. Plato's dialogues, written in 4th century BCE Athens, contained the seeds of nearly every major Gnostic doctrine. His theory of forms, his allegory of the cave, his portrait of the soul as a prisoner in the body, all of these would be transformed by Gnostic writers into the architecture of their religious systems. The gap between Plato and the Gnostics spans centuries and crosses the boundary between philosophy and religion. Plato wrote for an audience of philosophers. The Gnostics wrote of revelation and mythological cosmogonies, yet the conceptual DNA is unmistakable. The Gnostics found in Plato a ready-made framework for articulating their own profound alienation from the material world. His metaphysical dualism became their cosmic drama. His epistemology became their soteriology. His cosmology became their mythology. In this video, we're going to examine Plato's original philosophical positions, not the interpretations of later Platonists, and trace how these ideas were adapted into the religious visions of the Gnostics. Plato's awakening can be seen as an early form of Gnosis, many years before the concept was truly developed. This video is brought to you by my Patreon. If you want to support this channel so I can continue to make videos like this, you can subscribe for just $5 per month and get videos a couple days early and ad-free. You can also become a member here on YouTube for just $5 per month and get videos early as well, but they won't be ad-free. The easiest way to support though, as always, which costs you nothing, is just to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment about your thoughts after watching the video. I love reading what you all have to say. Thank you so much for the support from the bottom of my heart. Now let's begin. At the heart of Plato's philosophy lies a radical split in reality itself. There are two worlds, the realm of forms, eternal and perfect, and the material realm we inhabit, which is merely a flickering shadow of true being. The forms are not abstract concepts in the modern sense. They are the most real things that exist. The form of the good, the form of beauty, the form of justice. These are not ideas about goodness, beauty, and justice. These are goodness itself, beauty itself, justice itself, existing in a realm beyond space and time. Everything we encounter in the physical world is a degraded copy of these perfect templates. A beautiful person is beautiful only because they participate, however imperfectly, in the form of beauty. A just action is just only insofar as it reflects the form of justice. The material world is real in a derivative sense, like a shadow cast by something more substantial. It has being, but not the fullness of being. Plato's most famous illustration of this metaphysical architecture appears in the Allegory of the Cave from the Republic. Prisoners sit chained in a cave facing a wall. Behind them burns a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners, people carry objects that cast shadows on the wall. The prisoners see only shadows their entire lives, believing the shadows constitute reality. They don't know they're looking at projections. They don't know the fire exists. They certainly don't know about the sun-drenched world outside the cave. This is the human condition according to Plato. We are the prisoners. The shadows on the wall are the physical objects we perceive through our senses. The fire represents our limited understanding. The world outside the cave, bathed in sunlight, is the realm of forms, and the sun itself is the form of the good, the source of all truth and being. Most people live their entire lives staring at shadows, convinced they're seeing reality. Only the philosopher escapes. The Gnostics seized on this dualism with fierce enthusiasm. They too posited two worlds, the pleroma, a realm of divine fullness and spiritual light, and the material cosmos, a realm of deficiency and shadow. The pleroma is the Gnostic equivalent of Plato's realm of forms, the true reality, the proper home of divine beings. The material world corresponds to the cave, a place of imprisonment and illusion. In Gnostic texts like the Apocryphon of John, the pleroma contains the eons, divine beings emanating from the supreme God, existing in perfect spiritual union. Below this lies our cosmos, created through some catastrophic rupture in the divine order. But the Gnostic schools diverged on how completely to sever the material world from the divine. The Séan Gnostics made the most radical departure from Plato's framework. In their cosmology, the material world is not an imperfect reflection of the divine. It's a prison, a trap. Matter itself is evil. The hypostasis of the archons describes the material world as a realm of darkness and chaos, ruled by ignorant powers who don't even know the true God exists. The Valentinian Gnostics, however, maintain a vision closer to Plato's original conception. For Valentinus and his followers, the material world was not inherently evil, but rather a corruptible illusion, a product of divine deficiency rather than malicious intent. The cosmos arose from Sophia's fall, a cosmic error, yes, but one that created a realm containing hidden sparks of divinity. The material world became a kind of divine pedagogy, a temporary stage where the spiritual element within humans could be awakened through Gnosis and ultimately redeemed. Like Plato's prisoners who might one day turn from the shadows and walk toward the light, the Valentinian system allowed for degrees of spiritual awakening. Some humans are pneumatic, possessing spirit, some are psychic, possessing soul, some are hylic, bound entirely to matter. But even this hierarchy preserved a connection between the material and the spiritual realms that the more radical Gnostics severed completely. Where Plato saw shadows and sunlight on a continuum of being, the Séans saw an absolute wall between spirit and matter, light and darkness, salvation and damnation. The Valentinians occupied a position more similar to Plato's vision, insisting that the material realm represented a fall from fullness, but not inherently evil. Both Gnostic schools, however, agreed on the fundamental problem. We are living in a realm of shadows, and only knowledge of the true reality beyond can free us. In the Phaedrus, Plato tells a story about wings. He describes the soul before birth as a charioteer driving two horses, one noble, one unruly, across the heavens. The soul follows in the train of the gods, glimpsing the eternal forms beyond the rim of the cosmos. But the unruly horse pulls downward. The chariot loses altitude. The wings that sustain the soul's flight grow weak and eventually fail. The soul falls to earth and becomes imprisoned in a body. This descent is catastrophic. The soul, which once contemplated forms of beauty and justice, now perceives only shadows and copies. Trapped in flesh, it forgets what it once knew. The body becomes an obstacle, a weight dragging the soul away from its proper home. In the Phaedo, Plato uses a stark formula to express this condition. Soma sema, the body is a tomb, or perhaps he suggests the body is a prison. Either way, incarnation represents a fundamental displacement. The soul belongs elsewhere. Yet this very displacement contains the key to salvation. Because the soul once inhabited the realm of forms, it retains faint memories of what it saw there. Learning, according to Plato's doctrine of recollection, anamnesis, is actually remembering. When we recognize beauty in a physical object, we're not learning something new, we're recollecting the form of beauty we encountered before birth. Education is not filling an empty vessel, but awakening dormant knowledge. The philosopher's task is to help the soul remember its true nature and its true home. The Gnostic myth of the soul reads like Plato's Phaedrus rewritten for a new audience. Divine sparks, fragments of the true God, or emanations from the pleroma, have fallen into matter and become trapped in human bodies. These sparks have forgotten their origin, they've forgotten their divine. They wander in a daze, mistaking the shadow world for reality, unaware that they don't belong here. The gospel of truth speaks of living in a nightmare, groping in darkness, pursued by anxieties and terrors that dissolve when one awakens to Gnosis. The parallel to Plato's anamnesis is explicit in many Gnostic texts. The divine spark must be awakened, it must remember. A revealer figure, often identified as Jesus Christ, descends from the pleroma to remind the trapped spirits of their true identity. You are not from here, the revealer announces. You are from the realm of light. This is like the Gnostic call to awakening, and it functions exactly like Plato's theory of recollection. Salvation comes through remembering what the soul has forgotten. Both traditions agree on the essential point. The soul is in exile. It doesn't belong in matter. Its true home lies in a realm of pure being or pure spirit, far removed from the physical world. And both insist that this exile can only be overcome through a kind of knowledge, a recognition of what the soul truly is and where it truly belongs. The body may be a prison, but the mind holds the key. Plato draws a sharp line between two kinds of mental activity. There is doxa, mere opinion or belief, which relies on sense perception and deals with the changing world of appearances. Then there is episteme, true knowledge, which grasps the eternal forms through reason. Most people live their entire lives in the realm of opinion. They see a beautiful face and think they know beauty. They witness a just act and think they understand justice, but they're only grasping at shadows, forming beliefs about copies of copies. True knowledge requires turning away from the senses entirely and using reason to apprehend reality as it actually is. This distinction is not merely academic. For Plato, knowledge is transformative. The philosopher who ascends from opinion to knowledge becomes a different kind of person. In the cave allegory, the prisoner who breaks free and sees the sun cannot simply return to watching shadows. His eyes have adjusted to real light. His mind has grasped real being. He's been fundamentally changed by what he now knows. Knowledge is not information you possess, it's a condition you inhabit. The ascent from the cave to sunlight is difficult and disorienting. The prisoner's eyes hurt as they adjust to brighter light. Each stage of the journey requires abandoning what previously seemed certain. First he sees the shadows, then the reflections in water, then the objects themselves, then finally the sun. At each level, he must recognize that what he thought was real was only a lesser image of something more real. The journey is intellectual, but also spiritual, a complete reorientation of the soul toward truth. This is why Plato insists that philosophy is not for everyone. Only certain souls have the capacity to make this ascent. Only certain people can wrench themselves free from the comfortable lies of sense perception and endure the pain of truth. The philosopher is an elite figure, not because of social status, but because of intellectual and spiritual capability. Most people would reject the truth even if it were offered to them. They prefer the shadows. For the Gnostics, Gnosis, secret knowledge, became the sole means of salvation. But this was not intellectual knowledge in any ordinary sense. Like Plato's episteme, Gnosis was transformative and liberating. To receive Gnosis was to undergo a complete reversal of understanding. The Gospel of Philip states this principle bluntly. Ignorance is slavery, knowledge is freedom. The problem is not moral failure or ritual impurity. The problem is not knowing who you are. The Archons keep humanity in ignorance deliberately because an awakened human is an escaped human. Gnosis breaks the chains. It reveals that the divine spark within you is the same substance as the true God far above. You are not a sinner in need of forgiveness. You are a fragment of divinity in need of remembering. Like Plato, certain schools of Gnostics understood that this knowledge could not be grasped by everyone. The pneumatic humans, those with spirit, could receive Gnosis and be saved. The psychic humans, those with only soul, might achieve a lesser salvation through faith and good works, though some Gnostic schools denied even this. The Hydlic humans, those bound entirely to matter, were simply incapable of Gnosis. They lacked the spiritual capacity. Their fate was annihilation or continued imprisonment in matter. This created a spiritual aristocracy that mirrors Plato's philosophical elite. Both systems privilege those who can attain true knowledge over those who cannot. Both suggest that salvation or enlightenment is not a matter of moral effort, but of intellectual and spiritual capability. The philosopher and the Gnostic stand apart from ordinary humanity, possessing a vision that others cannot share. In Plato's Timaeus, the creation of the cosmos is the work of a divine craftsman called the Demiurge. This figure is not the highest god. He does not create from nothing. Instead, he looks upward to the eternal forms as his template and works with pre-existing chaos, imposing order and mathematical harmony on formless matter. The Demiurge is benevolent. He wants to make the cosmos as good as possible, but he's limited by the recalcitrant nature of the material he works with, what Plato calls anenki, necessity or constraint. The material world is imperfect, not because the Demiurge is incompetent or malicious, but because perfection cannot be fully realized in matter. The Demiurge operates as an intermediary between the realm of forms and the physical cosmos. He cannot bring the forms themselves into matter, they're eternal and immaterial by nature, but he can create images of the forms, copies that participate in the originals as much as matter allows. He fashions the heavens according to mathematical proportions. He creates time as a moving image of eternity. He gives the cosmos a soul to animate it. The result is imperfect, but still good, still rational, still beautiful within the constraints of materiality. This cosmology solves several problems for Plato. It explains why the physical world is orderly rather than chaotic. The Demiurge imposed rational structure. It explains why the world is imperfect despite deriving from perfect forms. Matter itself resists perfection. And it explains why there's a gap between ultimate reality and physical reality. The Demiurge mediates between the two. The cosmos is not the work of the highest principle, but of a subordinate divine intelligence working with limited materials. The Gnostics seized on the figure of the Demiurge with startling creativity. They kept the basic structure, a subordinate deity who creates the material world while looking to higher templates, but they inverted the moral valence. The structure remained, the evaluation changed completely. For the Sethian Gnostics, the Demiurge became a villain. In the Apocryphon of John, this figure is called Yaldabaoth, a monstrous entity born from Sophia's fall. He's ignorant of the true God above him. Worse, he's arrogant. He proclaims, "I am God, and there is no other God beside me," unaware that he's merely a deficient copy of true divinity. This false god creates the material cosmos as a prison for the divine sparks. He and his archons rule this world as tyrants, feeding on human ignorance and suffering. The Sethian Demiurge is not benevolent, but actively malevolent, or at minimum, catastrophically ignorant and drunk on unearned power. The Valentinian Gnostics took a more nuanced position, one that preserved more of Plato's original conception while still marking the Demiurge as problematic. For Valentinus, the Demiurge is not evil, but ignorant and deficient. He creates the material world without full knowledge of the pleroma above. He's described as psychic rather than pneumatic, possessing soul but not spirit. He believes himself to be the supreme god because he cannot perceive anything higher. His creation is flawed, not because he intends harm, but because he lacks the fullness of divine knowledge. The Valentinian Demiurge is more pitiable than hateable, a limited being doing the best he can with inadequate understanding. Both Gnostic schools, however, agreed on the crucial point: the creator of this world is not the true God. That conviction alone represents a radical departure from both Jewish and emerging Christian orthodoxy, which insisted that the God of Genesis and the highest God are one and the same. The Gnostics read Genesis and saw the Demiurge at work. "Let us make man in our image," says the God of Genesis, using the plural. The Gnostics heard the Demiurge speaking to his archons. The serpents in the garden, which Orthodoxy read as Satan, the Gnostics read as a liberating figure bringing knowledge to humanity against the Demiurge's wishes. This inversion shows how the Gnostics used Platonic structure to subvert biblical narrative. Plato's benevolent but limited craftsman becomes a cosmic tyrant or a cosmic fool, depending on the Gnostic school you asked. Yet the basic architecture remained intact. A subordinate deity creates the material world while looking to higher templates, and this explains why the world is both orderly and deeply flawed. The Gnostics didn't invent this cosmology. They took it from Plato and rewrote the moral script, turning the craftsman into the antagonist of their religious drama. Plato's universe is not flat. Reality arranges itself in levels, each more real than the one below it. At the top sit the forms themselves, eternal, unchanging, purely intelligible. Below them, though Plato is less explicit here, are mathematical objects and principles that mediate between pure forms and physical instantiation. Below that lies the realm of physical objects, which participate in the forms but are subject to change and decay. At the bottom are shadows, reflections, images, copies of copies, the least real things that can still be said to exist at all. The Republic presents this hierarchy visually in the divided line. Plato asks us to imagine a vertical line divided into 4 unequal segments. The lowest segment represents images and shadows, perceived through imagination. The next segment up represents physical objects, perceived through belief. Above that lies mathematical reasoning, which grasps intelligible objects through calculation. At the highest level sits philosophical knowledge, which apprehends the forms themselves through pure intellect. Each level is more real, more true, more knowable than the one below it. This is not arbitrary classification for Plato. Each level really does possess a different degree of being. A shadow has less reality than the object casting it. A physical tree has less reality than the form of tree. The hierarchy reflects an ontological truth about the structure of existence itself. To ascend the levels is to move from appearance toward reality, from becoming toward being, from darkness toward light. The hierarchy also requires intermediaries. The forms themselves cannot directly interact with matter. They're immaterial and eternal, while matter is physical and temporal. Something must bridge that gap. The Demiurge serves this function, looking upward to the forms while working downward with matter. The world soul, which the Demiurge creates, serves as another intermediary, animating the cosmos and connecting the rational principles from above with the material substrate below. Even individual human souls function as intermediaries, belonging partially to the eternal realm through their rational capacity while being temporarily bound to bodies. The Gnostic cosmologies took Plato's hierarchical structure and elaborated it into Baroque complexity. Between the highest god and the material world, they posited vast chains of intermediate beings called eons or emanations. The Valentinian system is the most intricate. The Valentinian pleroma typically contains 30 eons arranged in pairs, each representing divine attributes or principles. These are not separate gods, but aspects or expressions of the one highest god, existing in perfect unity. The eons bear names like mind, word, life, church, wisdom. They form a hierarchical structure where each level derives from and is sustained by the one above it, yet all remain connected in divine harmony, at least until Sophia's fall disrupts this order and leads to the creation of the material cosmos. The Sethian cosmologies are somewhat simpler but still elaborately hierarchical. The Apocryphon of John describes the invisible spirit as the highest level, surrounded by eons and luminaries. Below these exist various orders of power and authorities, descending step by step until we reach Yaldabaoth and his archons, who rule the material cosmos. Between the highest divine realm and our world stretch multiple levels of being, each with its own inhabitants and functions. The hierarchies also map stages of ascent for the soul. Just as the Gnostic cosmos descended through multiple levels from spirit to matter, the awakened soul must ascend back through those same levels to reach the pleroma. Various Gnostic texts describe the soul's journey upward, passing through the spheres ruled by archons, speaking passwords or demonstrating knowledge to get past each barrier, until it finally reaches the realm of light. The conceptual architecture of Gnosticism stands on Platonic foundations. The two-world split between spirit and matter, the soul imprisoned in flesh and longing for escape, knowledge as the path to liberation, the Demiurge as craftsman of an imperfect cosmos. So many elements of Gnostic cosmology find its prototype in Plato's dialogues. The Gnostics did not invent these ideas. They inherited them, they adapted them, they forged them into religious mythology. What Plato offered as philosophy, the Gnostics transformed into revelation. Where Plato argued through dialectic and analogy, the Gnostics narrated cosmic dramas of fallen eons and imprisoned light. The ideas worked because Plato had already provided the intellectual scaffolding. His metaphysical dualism gave the Gnostics a way to articulate their profound alienation from the material world. Plato's concept proved endlessly adaptable to religious movements precisely because they address fundamental human experiences. The senses that we don't quite belong here, that something is wrong with the world, that knowledge can transform us, that the visible realm points towards something beyond itself. In making Plato's philosophy their own, the Gnostics gave his abstract metaphysics narrative power, emotional urgency, and salvific promise. They turned the philosopher's ascent into the soul's desperate flight home. Thank you so much for joining me. Let me know in the comments what you think of Plato's philosophical ideas. Do you think he attained Gnosis himself? As I mentioned in the beginning, if you would like to support the channel, you can join my Patreon for just $5 per month and get early access to videos. For a one-time donation, there's a Ko-fi and PayPal link in the description and pinned in the comments. But the easiest way to support is just to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a future video. Check out my website, Occulys.com, and the other history channel I narrate for called Folks of Yore. Again, thank you so much for watching. Until next time.